Welcome to my UFC Warehouse card. I'm gonna be showing you all the fights I want to see, my wish list of this card, and yeah, I mean this card is going to happen. If Trump and Dana White say it's going to happen, realistically, it's going to happen next year, July 4th, unless World War III happens and we all die. But hopefully that doesn't happen. But yeah, so this is going to be easily the biggest event out there ever in the UFC history, if not combat sports in general, if not events, it's just sports in general as well. Like this is going to be huge, and so we had like previous huge events, like all of Connor's pay-per-views or all of Alex Pereira's pay-per-views or UFC 100, UFC 200, UFC 300, or GSP versus Bisping. Where there's three new champs that one night. This is going to be a bigger event than all of those. I want to say combined, but maybe close to maybe combined. I don't know. But yeah, I'll be taking inspiration from all of these events, and for my reasoning as to my choices of what I want to see for this White House card. So to start off with the early prelims, I'm going to have Bo Nickel versus Jung Young Park, or the Iron Turtle. Bo Nickel, he represents American Wrestling in 2025 UFC. I mean, he lost and his hype went down. I mean, didn't really have too much hype, but he kind of had a bunch of haters. But this is going to be a good step down fight from RDR. Park is kind of a wrestler himself, so I do see Park wanting to test Bo Nickel's wrestling because we really haven't seen it recently. And so this will be a good matchup at the unrankings area of middleweight, and a great start off to the White House event. Makes sense in my opinion. Now for the next fight is Jacoby Smith versus Sam Patterson. Jacoby Smith is undefeated. Sam Patterson isn't undefeated, but he is undefeated at welterweight. He only lost to that Israeli dude at 155. And so, yeah, they're both on a tear. They're both having a bunch of finishes. Smith finished Nico Price, and Patterson finished... who did he finish? He finished Waters. I forgot his first name. Great finishes from both fighters. And it's going to be an exciting fight for the second fight of the UFC White House. USA versus England. That narrative is also in there, and it makes sense in my opinion. It makes sense. So the third fight for the early prelims, I got Charles Johnson versus Steve Erceg. Charles Johnson is on a winning streak right now. He's on a resurgence basically. He had a crazy finish over Loner, and Steve Erceg, he is on the opposite. He is on a downfall from having an amazing performance against the champ Pantoja, and even though he did have a win over Ode, that was at bantamweight, and so he needs another good win at 125, and Johnson is there. Yeah, good step up for either fighter. This is for who deserves to be at the rankings. Higher in the rankings. Who deserves to be higher in the rankings? And there's a good fight for either or. USA versus Australia, right? Yeah, Australia. And so it makes perfect sense. In my opinion, for the second of the third fight of the early prelims. And yeah, like I said, it's going to be stacked. The UFC 300 was stacked. It literally started off with Cody Garbrandt versus Figueiredo. So don't be like, oh, these are too big names. Like, these are too many big names for the early prelims. Brother, this is the biggest White House out there. This is the UFC White House. This is the biggest event. You cannot have no names starting off your early prelims. I see people doing that. Are you stupid? No, they're not going to waste a UFC White House on no names. Unranked no names. So yeah, sorry for that little rant. Joe Pyfer versus Kopylov. Joe Pyfer representing white people. I don't know. Anyways, there's a lot of white people at middleweight. Not gonna lie, if you think about it. Like, there's Joe Pyfer, there's Bo Nickel, Sean Strickland, Zachary Reese, and there's like 50 other white Americans. Anyways, I guess they're just naturally that weight class. But anyways, Joe Pyfer versus Kopylov. It makes sense. Pyfer is going to be fighting Abus, and if he wins, he's going to be close in the rankings against Kopylov, and it's going to be interesting stylistic. I could have him against Costa, but I don't know. It's a little bit too early for Pyfer. And so I would like to see Pyfer versus Kopylov right now. The stylistic matchup between both of them. And Costa, he beat Kopylov, so why would you fight Piper? You know, that wouldn't make too sense. Ugh. And you know, you don't want to get Piper a wrestler for the UFC White House, so you know, boxer versus kickboxer makes sense in my opinion. So yeah. Now for the prelims, starting off with Brendan Allen versus Kyle Barajo, America versus Brazil. You know, that rivalry is there for the UFC. You know, that rivalry has existed since the beginning of UFC 1, and it makes sense. You want a fighting nerds as well in this card, so there's that. You know, being Kyle, and you know, they're both kind of close. You know, in skill, especially because Kyle Barajo lost, some of his aura, you know, faded away. He's not undefeated in the UFC, and so that could give Allen some confidence to make this a more competitive fight than it would have been like a couple weeks ago. And you know, they're both well rounded. They both have good striking, good grappling. So you know, this is not gonna be too exciting. I will admit, but you know, it will be a good showcase of middleweight skill and a good fight for UFC White House. And we have another American representative. Second fight of the prelims is Buckley versus Prates. Another fighting nerds. Another America versus Brazil. This will be amazing, even if it wasn't for anything else other just their stylistic matchup. I would love to see this fight, Buckley versus Prates. Even though Prates is going to be fighting Jeff Neal, I mean he's going to be fighting what's his name? He just fought Jeff Neal. He's going to be fighting what's his name? Leon Edwards. So it is going to be a step down. I could imagine maybe in a hypothetical timeline, Buckley gets a couple wins, 1 or 2 before the UFC White House, and then this fight makes sense. But I would like to see this fight because stylistic matchup. Buckley is American, another fighting nerds, and so yeah, book it. So the third fight of the prelims, I got Derek Lewis versus Waldo Cortez Acosta. There's not many Americans at heavyweight right now, and nowhere near the title contentions conversations as well. And so Lewis is there, Waldo Cortez Acosta is there. They're kind of close in the rankings, and they're both stand and bang. You know, they don't really wrestle at all, and one has a power boxing style and the other one has a speed boxing style. So it makes sense for this fight. You know, America versus Dominican, but I mean, is the Dominican country related to the U.S. kind of like the same way as Puerto Rico is? If not, I don't know. Maybe I'm just dumb, but I mean, I am kind of dumb, but makes sense in my opinion. This is a good fight to have Derek Lewis. How can you not have Derek Lewis for the UFC White House as well? Kind of crazy, and yeah, this is a good fight in my opinion. Next is Roundtree versus Olberg. Like I said, there's kind of the similar way of thinking for Derek Lewis, where there's no American at light heavyweight right now close to the belt, and the Roundtree is there. He's exciting. He has a name. Derek Lewis is exciting. He has a name. And the only person that makes sense right now is Olberg. Roundtree fought hell. He's going to fight Yuri. He might lose to Yuri. There's a good chance he does. And so there's another fight for Olberg to get to, fight his way up to the title again. And there's a good opportunity to have him for the UFC White House. Roundtree is now has a fan base. He's now seen as like a violent Muay Thai striker at light heavyweight. So it'll be exciting to see him against a stylistic matchup against Olberg as well. So I think Olberg is from New Zealand, so it's not really gonna be. It's not the USA versus Australia rivalry. The US has a rivalry with like 100 countries to begin with, but yeah, it's gonna be kind of interesting to see this for the UFC White House. Another fight to include, in my opinion. And now the last fight for the prelims, we got Aljamain Sterling versus Lerone Murphy, another USA versus England matchup. This is a previous champ versus a number one contender fighter, and I mean you could have Sterling versus Diego Lopez, Sterling versus Musbar, but I chose Murphy just for the simple reason of USA versus England, and so we already have USA versus Brazil for with Buckley and Allen, and I mean you can have USA versus Russia, but I mean I already have Joe Piper versus Kopylov for that, and maybe it makes sense to have Musbar instead. It's very 50-50. You can easily replace Murphy with Musbar, but I would like to see Sterling versus Murphy just for the simple reason Murphy's more exciting and crazy. Everybody's more exciting than Musbar to begin with, but Murphy is more exciting, and we already see Sterling versus Musbar to begin with, so it makes sense. Sterling versus Murphy, new matchup for Sterling and number one contender battle. So it is exciting. And yeah, now for the main event, the holy stacked main card. Now for the main event, I got Sean Strickland versus Robert Whittaker. Now this fight was like kind of in the talks like this year and last year. Supposedly Strickland avoided Whittaker, didn't want to sign a fight against him, and so that fell out. But now this fight they can sign this fight for the UFC White House. You know, it's impossible to think a UFC White House without Strickland, and so yeah, Strickland versus Robert Whittaker. You can have a Strickland fight Izzy, but we already seen that fight, and I don't know if we want to see it again. It's kind of interesting to see the build up between a Strickland versus Izzy 2 again, but I think this will make sense. A fresh matchup for Strickland. You know, Strickland already basically fought like 90% of 185, so it does make sense. Fight Strickland versus Whittaker, fresh matchup for the main event. Yeah. All right, next is O'Malley versus Sandhagen. O'Malley also another champ, so O'Malley versus Sandhagen. Oh, dude, I already forgot Strickland was a former champ as well. Anyways, O'Malley versus Sandhagen. Sandhagen is going to fight for the belt. I do think Merab beats him, and yeah, he's going to fight for the number one title spot against O'Malley. And this is another fight that people have wanting to see for a while already. You know, and it makes perfect sense. You know, even though it is American versus American, book it for the UFC White House. It would be crazy not to see this fight for the UFC White House. And yeah, book it. Stylistic matchup is going to be crazy for these two. But yeah, next one is Kayla Harrison versus Nunes, the first championship fight of the card. Now I technically I could have like 5 championship fights on this card, but it'll be too selfish. So I went with 3, and it'll be too selfish to have 3 main event men fights. So I had to sprinkle in a WMMA fight. So don't get too mad at me. You know, I'm trying to be a little bit inclusive as well. You know, diversity. But anyways, Kayla Harrison versus Nunes. Nunes, coming back from retirement, fighting Harrison. It's gonna be interesting. It's going to be somewhat hype. You know, you can't deny there's going to be an exciting fight for the White House or for WMMA. So yeah, it makes sense. The first championship fight, Harrison versus Nunes. Now the second championship fight, you're gonna be thinking, who else is right now a American champion? Because there's no other American champion. Well, there's no American champion, but there is a close American contender that is close to fighting for the belt, and that's going to be JDM versus Sean Brady. I do think JDM is going to be Islam. Maybe. There's I'm like 51-49 that JDM beats Islam. Like it's just a little bit. I'm like a little bit leaning towards JDM, but yeah, JDM beats Islam. We're gonna have, or maybe you can have Islam versus Brady. Maybe that would be exciting too. But for right now, I'm gonna have JDM in that spot versus Brady. Brady, he's going to fight. I don't know who else they give him. Shavkat, they can probably give him. And once he beats Shavkat, he can fight for the belt in this hypothetical timeline. So yeah, so you can have JDM versus Brady. American versus Australian. This will be a crazy matchup. Even though Brady, his style is more, he's a wrestler, so he's not gonna have too many fans. I think if JDM beats Islam, that already is a good enough, because JDM is going to be bringing that Australian and fan base of the boxing fan base as well. A lot of people like Ilya because he's like a boxer in the UFC. So yeah, JDM is going to be also bringing that fan base, and it's going to be a good fight for the co-main event for the UFC White House. So yeah, that's gonna be the second championship fight. Now for the last championship fight, how to explain this? Dana White said he didn't want John Jones for his card, but he did want Conor. So I'm gonna have to be a little bit realistic, and I'm gonna have to add one of them to this card. And you're gonna be thinking, that's not too good, because the matchmaking is a little bit unfair for what I did. And in my opinion, I do not want to see 2 washed fighters fighting for the main event. I do not want to see 2 old retired fighters or one that's almost out of retirement fighters fighting for the main event. I hate that. I do not want to see 2 Gramps hitting each other with walking sticks in the main event. Okay, So before you get mad, this is what I have. I got Conor versus Max Holloway 2. For the same reason, because I would like if I want how to explain this. I could have Holloway versus Ilya, but Dana White would really want Conor or in this card, and so it's like, well, the second best thing out of Ilya is Conor McGregor, so you know, let's have him fight for the against Holloway for the BMF lightweight bout, or the third championship fight, which even though the BMF is kind of done. So this is the best thing I could do, is have Holloway versus Conor McGregor. Now you can say, oh, Conor McGregor versus Chandler is more exciting, you know. No, it's not. Okay, I would want to see Holloway versus Conor McGregor at lightweight. If not, to make it more competitive, they can do it at welterweight. You know, Holloway versus McGregor at welterweight. But yeah, I would like to, in my opinion, I would say Dana White, shut up. Let's have Holloway versus Ilya 2 at lightweight rematch for the main event with UFC White House. But he really wants Conor McGregor. The sport can leave Conor McGregor in the past, in my opinion. I don't want to see Conor McGregor again, especially after what he pulled for UFC 300. You know, he pulled out, and that, you know, it wasn't that he ruined that event. And he's talking about John Jones ruining events. Like, Conor McGregor ruined UFC 300. I don't get it. It's kind of dumb. Money is the reason. But anyways, my opinion, I would have Holloway versus Ilya, but realistically, Conor McGregor's going to be on this card, or maybe he pulls out again. Who knows? But yeah, Holloway versus McGregor. I'm not too excited for for the main event. Like this was my compromise. It's like, oh, I can't have everything, you know. So, you know, Holloway versus McGregor it is. No Michael Chandler. I do not want to see two old men fighting for the main event. No Nate Diaz. I do not want to see two old people fighting for the main event for this historical fight. Yeah, those are my my card. That is my thing. So give your opinions down below if you think I did good or I did horrible. You know, I don't care if you say I did horrible. So go ahead. But yeah, these are my card. So yeah, give your opinions down below. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good day. If you're American, hoorah. If you're not, boo. No, I'm joking. Hope you guys have a good day, and goodbye.